This week got even wilder for UK politics. Robert Jenrick, the former Tory immigration minister, who was literally in charge of border policy under Rishi Sunak, has defected to Reform UK. In his announcement, he called Reform the country's last shot, fixing broken Britain, mass deportation, secure borders, and no more apologies for British history, and full cultural pushback. Tories are reeling, Reform is celebrating, and the internet is exploding with takes. So let's ask the big, uncomfortable question right up front. Are the Conservatives actually dead as a serious political force? Have the Tories completely sold out their own voters? Trading principles, corporate donations, globalist agendas, and snobbish Westminster bubble life? And has the party become so elitist and out of touch that even one of their own hardliners can't stomach it anymore? In January 2026, with Reform already leading or tied to national polls and local elections looming in May, Jenrick's defection feels like the loudest death knell yet for the old Conservative Party. So why did Robert Jenrick leave the Tories, even as a rising Tory star, decided to jump ship to Reform UK right now? What does his move reveal about the collapse of the Conservatives, and does it confirm what a lot of people have suspected for years, that the Tories have sold out ordinary Brits, prioritised snobbish elite interests, and lost any real connection to their base? Today, we're going to be deep on the defection details, the Tory meltdown and the snob factor, the sellout accusations, and what this shift could mean for the right in 2026. Buckle up, this one's going to be a long one. So what actually happened with Jenrick's defection and why the timing matters? With Jenrick made the announcement in mid-January 2026 via a lengthy statement on X, formerly Twitter, followed by interviews on GB News, Times Radio and other outlets. He didn't mince words. He accused the Conservatives of having lost its own way on the issues that matter most: uncontrolled immigration, cultural erosion, economic stagnation, and refusal to stand up for British identity. As someone who served as immigration minister, housing secretary, and even ran for Tory leader in 2024, coming second to Kemi Badenoch, he claims he fought these battles from the inside, but was blocked by weak leadership, bureaucratic interior, and a party too scared to take bold action. The key lines from his statement were that the Conservatives have failed to deliver on promises made to the British people, Reform UK is now the only willing to take the decisive steps needed, mass deportation, secure borders, and restoration of pride in our history and values. And to do with this is Britain's last shot, I cannot stand by while the country continues to go down the wrong path. Timing is brutal for the Tories. It's coming just weeks after Reform claimed paid membership over 268,000, surpassing Labour activists' base in some counts. While Tory membership continues to cater, polls by UK Gov show Reform either leading as a main opposition or within touching distance of Labour. With local elections in May 2026, of which Keir Starmer has not been able to block by the House of Lords, plus Scottish Parliament and Welsh Synod voters, Jenrick's defection gives Reform instant credibility and an ex-minister with real government experience, not just a protest politician. To do with the Tories' reaction from this, and their response was immediate and furious. Kemi Badenoch called it a betrayal of trust and accused Jenrick of opportunism, saying that he should have stayed and fought from within. Other Tory MPs lined up brand him as a rat leaving a sinking ship or a careerist. But the grim reality is that the Conservatives are bleeding MPs, donors and voters at an alarming rate. Membership has collapsed since 2019 high water mark. Polling puts them in third place in some surveys behind both Labour or Reform. This brings up the core issues to question that, are the Conservatives actually dead? Well, they're not really, since they still have a parliamentary presence and institutional muscle, but as a meaningful ideological force, yes, many argue they are. The party that once stood for the theatric nationalism, small state conservatism, and cultural confidence has morphed into something unrecognisable, socially liberal uncomfortable on many issues, economically timid, or terrified of offending corporate donors or international opinion. And it's telling now, the evidence is strong, I would say. Successive Tory governments in 2010 and 2024 promised to cut net migration to the tens of thousands. It hit records high under their watch. They talked tough on borders but delivered record legal migration, student visas and care worker routes. Critics say this was deliberate, cheap labour for big business, City of London lobbying, and a snobbish disdain for Little Englanders who wanted lower numbers. The party prioritised global interests, Davos, World Economic Forum and EU-aligned trade deals over the concerns of their traditional working class and provincial base. And to do with them being snobbish, absolutely, and say the defectors and many ex-Tories, Westminster Tory life is poshed in his think tank circuits, corporate boards, and a bubble where populism is sneered as vulgar. Jenrick himself has talked about being sidelined for being too right-wing on migration. The party has become a club for metropolitan elites who took down the Red Wall voters, who delivered their 2019 landslide, treating them as useful idiots rather than the core of the movement. Jenrick's defection is a symptom of that snobbish sellout. Even a former Prime Minister who played the game from inside couldn't take it anymore. So what does this mean for politics in 2026? The reform's opportunity, though they do risk, is that it remains as a clear winner here. Jenrick brings policy depth, media polish, and a direct line to disaffected Tory voters. If more MPs followed this, and there are whispers that some might, reform could become a dominant force on the right. May 2026 locals will be first real test, strong gains, and could make reform the main opportunist in all but name. But the questions still linger. Is Jenrick truly principled, or is he self-serving careerism? Has his loyalty to Sunak until the leadership race and beyond? Why now? Can reform absorb ex-Tories without turning into the same snobbish, self-interested machine? Farage's centralised control and media focus already draw criticism. If the Tories are dead or dying, does this realign British politics permanently? A new populist right versus establishment left? Or is this just more fragmentation within UK politics? I think it's safe to say in 2026, with economic pressures, migration crisis and cultural debates raging, this defection could be the moment the old Conservative Party finally breaks apart, either dying quietly or being reborn in reform's image. Either way, the snobbish sellout eras of the Tories looks finished. To do with Jenrick's move exposes how Tories disconnect runs. Even their own ministers feel the party has sold out the people it claims to represent. And if you watch closely for more defections in the coming weeks, if a few more MPs go, the Tory brand could become a toxic beyond repair. So anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video about if the Conservative Party is dead. Obviously there is obvious signs that they aren't, but when it comes down to people defecting from one party to the other. And that's the thing with reform, I do think that they have even got ex-Tories in, and the problem with that, in my opinion, is that you're going to have the same problem you got with the Tories, where they'll say they'll crack down on immigration, as we've seen with Farage. You know, he's done the populism where he's trying to hide his power level, he's trying to go, oh, well, mass deportations are an impossibility, but with his numbers growing, he's then changed his tune. And the problem is that when you have inconsistent policies in populism, I do think that what's going to end up happening is that he's going to probably backtrack when people say, oh, you're being too hardline, oh, you're not being too hardline, and it creates an inconsistent policy. And I think you can actually be able to be principled within politics, even in conservative spaces, but the problem with Farage is that he, and like I've noticed, especially what happened with UKIP, is that he's more of a careerist. He's more of a person that is basically kind of like the snobbish elite I mentioned in the video, where they just kind of only care about the voters and corporate donors rather than actual policy, because that's to do with politics, and because obviously it's its name. And whether or not there'll be more defects, but in my opinion, I don't think it really matters, because they have been able to get a strong base. I do think that a lot of it, especially as it's been getting more and more browner, which is what happened with Labour, because they relied on the Muslim vote, and I've seen that reform has slowly become browner. I actually saw a Facebook post, I actually saw on my feed where it was reform, but they're all just like foreigners, and it's just like, what is this? What actually is this? It's just a bunch of foreigners. And then I saw more foreigners like Lilia Cunningham, if I remember the name correctly. She actually joined. There's two. The problem is that they're doing what modern Christianity does, where it's trying to cook to any race or culture in order to gain followers. And I think they're just going to have the same issues that they got with what happened with Tories. So essentially what will happen is there'll be like a merger, but either way, as I said in last week's video, they're basically just cut from the same cloth. But it's very interesting to see why Jenrick, of all people, would actually defect. As well, if you want to click on these videos here where I've talked about more topics like this, including snobbish and conservative elitist people, and also to do with reform, I talk about those a little bit more in detail. And before I click on this video, I actually have links to my other channels and my socials as well, and to do with my Discord.